YouTube family, and welcome to the channel. Today I'm pleased to introduce to you my new to me 2003 Acura 3.2 CL 6-speed manual in Aegean Blue Pearl. Those of you in the audience already know how special this car is. In fact, a couple of years ago I featured a video on my friend Eric's CL 6-speed and discussed a little bit about the background on the car's history and things of that nature. But I want to get in a little bit deeper in this video about my specific car in Aegean Blue Pearl over ebony leather with navigation. Now, indeed, this car is a rare bird. As a matter of fact, Acura only produced the 6-speed manual in the 3.2 CL for one model year. That was 2003. And so it was kind of a last gasp to the second generation CL. And in fact, as history would have it, it's the last 6-speed manual V6 coupe that Acura produced. Of course, back in the 90s, Acura had the Legend, including the Type 2 with a 6-speed manual. But this car was not necessarily a direct successor to the Legend. In fact, the first gen CL, if you remember, had an available 4-cylinder power plant as well as the V6, although at that time you could only get the V6 with the automatic. Now for 2003, the CL could be optioned in one of 6 colors. Those included Aegean Blue Pearl, as you see here, Anthracite Metallic, Nighthawk Black Pearl, San Marino Red, Satin Silver Metallic, and Taffeta White. So in terms of production numbers, this car is one of 358 total units in this Aegean Blue, and that makes it the second most rare, the first being Taffeta White with 247 units. Now these are figures that I obtained through a tried and true CL enthusiast and aficionado friend of mine, Ty McWalters. I'll put a link to his channel so you can discover a little bit more about the deep dive that he's doing on CL production numbers, and more importantly, how many are still on the road today. But it's important to note that Ty's figures encompass a worldwide distribution, whereas there were previously some numbers that circulated around, especially on the Acura forums, that pertained exclusively to the US spec models. This is a 2+2 cockpit. I'll show you here in a little bit, but there's a nice little console in the back seat here. The seat, by the way, has a motorized mechanism that pushes it forward once you open the door. The Legend didn't have that. And if you look a little closer on the dash here, you'll see what makes this car a little bit of a standout, and that's that navigation screen. Of course, it is very antiquated by today's standards, but it does still work, and the DVD brain for that is located in the trunk. I'll show you here in a little bit. A little backstory on this specific unit. So this was a California car for its first 21 years. In fact, it was sold new from the dealership right near where my Legend originated, out in the San Jose area. And it made its way to Utah and subsequently here to Arizona, where I actually found it at a little mom and pop dealership that kind of didn't know what they had in terms of, you know, the rarity of this car, being that it's one of 68 units in this specific color combination with navigation. Under the hood, we find one of Honda's most famous J-series power plants. This one is the J32. It was rated at 260 horsepower and 232 pound-feet of torque for the Type S. On lower models, for the base model, it was rated at 225 horsepower. So there was a pretty good bump for the Type S there. And I also want to mention some niceties that the Type S did add. One of those was a helical limited slip differential. This car, according to its records, is accident-free and largely unmodified. All CLs, by the way, were manufactured in Honda's East Liberty, Ohio manufacturing facility up through the conclusion in 2003. And as we know it, the CL did not have a direct successor. They did continue to produce the RSX in a 2-door manual fashion for a few more years, but this car was definitely the last of its kind. And it might not look like it, but this car does have 183,101 miles on the odometer. And from what I can tell, it's been incredibly well kept. I have a number of checklist items that I'm working through on the mechanical aspects, but cosmetically, it did not take much to bring to this show quality level. Of course, we have that famous 6-speed shift knob. By the way, this has a lot of design characteristics to the NSX NA1 shift knob in my other car, so I don't know if they're directly related, but I definitely see the resemblance. There is an aftermarket Sony head unit here with touchscreen CarPlay connectivity. By the way, I did already source an OEM head unit, so in due time that will get swapped out. The only other modification that I can find on the car is that the interior bulbs have been switched out to LED in just about every case that I've seen. What's crazy is, in the long scheme of things, just how long I've been following these cars. I was about 20 years old when they came out for the second generation, and then 22 or 23 when I first heard about the 6-speed manual. And admittedly, ever since then, I kind of wanted one of these, in particularly the 3-pedal configuration. In fact, there's a picture that I'll include of me in the video standing at an Acura dealership in Escondido, California, back when the CL first launched in 2001, and it did happen to be a blue Type S. Some of you may also remember a few years ago, I was involved a little bit in the launch of the new rebirth of the Type S nameplate, and Acura corporate does have an Aegean blue CLS, but theirs is an automatic, has crazy low miles. I remember driving it and it had something less than 500 or so miles. Then also a couple of years ago, I mentioned this car along with other V6 manual luxury coupes as what I would consider a future collectible car. You aren't going to see any more of these sort of big body V6 manual transmission cars ever again. So those of us who have them now are going to want to hang on to them and preserve them for safekeeping. Just a quick note on maintenance. I did mention that this car is going through some mechanical rework, which is to be expected for a vehicle with 180,000 miles. So here's a few things that I've done so far. They included removal of the tint. This car had limo tint all the way around, which I wasn't a fan of. And here's the list. It was an oil and filter, timing belt and water pump, rear brake pads, passenger window regulator, cooling fan assembly, ECT sensor, a bleed and fill of the cooling system, timing belt tensioner, and a side engine mount. And then just more recently, within the last couple weeks, I replaced the battery. So there are a few more items I'm going to get to eventually on this car, but like any sort of large-scale restoration, I have to do things in phases to manage the financial aspect of it. Now that the wind died down, I'll switch to just the phone's mic. You can hear a startup. Very characteristic sound of that Honda J Series V6. And the Navi powering up here. Gyro sensor, I forgot to show you that. So let's pop the trunk and I'll introduce you to that mechanism. So here's the navigation system DVD control unit. I don't know how old the disc in that is, nor do I know if they make new ones. I highly doubt it. So for right now, I'm not too concerned about having the latest and greatest navigation because I usually use my phone anyway. Couple quick things worth noting just because I'm out here anyway. Here's a replica window sticker that I had Jason Poella make up. He is the man when it comes to all kinds of documentation assistance. Notice I did have the specifications there laid out as he needed them, but one little Easter egg you'll see here, I had him put on the bottom, Aegean Blue Pearl 6-speed manual Navi, one of 68. So for those who know what this car is, I think that makes it a little more special, having that actually called out on the window sticker. Another thing I learned was that this car was actually on the cover of GT3 for PlayStation 2. You can see kind of the outline of the taillight there. Obviously that was an 0102 model with the non-clear upper portion, but I had to get a copy of that just for fun. Last but not least, one of my favorite ads for the 03 CLS is this one that says joystick. I thought that was a really clever one from Acura's marketing team 22 years ago. To close things out today, I'm going to go through some of the paperwork on my CL because even though it came with virtually nothing except for a title, I've been able to assemble a great deal of documentation. So here's the binder. It's looking pretty big already, but this is kind of a cool summary of the car's early days. It's a VIN inquiry that was done by an Acura dealer for me, and aside from this, I did have another piece of information that illustrated the actual build date. So July 30th, 2002, it rolled off the East Liberty, Ohio assembly plant. It was dealer inspected 8/22/02 at Los Gatos, Acura. And then it was sold to its original owner on 10/15/2002 with 127 miles on it. It does give me the original owner's last name there, but I believe the car has changed hands a couple of times since then, so I don't know who those individuals are. Here's the production number breakout that I spoke about out on site this afternoon. You can see the total there at the bottom right, 3845 cars across US and Canada, across all 6 colors, and the navigation and non-nav variants. So right there, the circled number that you see on the top line is the 68 cars that mine falls into that category. Thought this was kind of fun to share. My Legend Coupe actually had 01 to 02 CL wheels on it for a little while, those chrome ones. Another copy of the window sticker that I showed earlier, the car stickered at 33.2, including destination. You can see the combination there. I went through and printed out a bunch of press releases from when the car was announced, going back all the way to 2001 for the beginning of the second gen, as well as some specific articles, or rather announcements on just the 03, because there were quite a few things that Acura did with the later iterations of this car just before it was discontinued. So you can see the features and specifications here. I'm not going to dig too deeply into all of that. Using some newspaper detective work, I was able to find quite a lot of reference material in print media that went out when this car hit the marketplace. So this one was a story from the Motoring Times Colonist, Friday, July 6, 2002. Acura introduces manual shift coupe. Acura boosts performance with a 6-speed manual. 6-speed transmission adds excitement to an already very fun car. The list goes on and on. There were a lot of publications talking about this car because enthusiasts had been asking for a manual transmission in this for a while. This was kind of a fun one that talks about deals on all the other corresponding models. There's the new 2003 CL for $429 a month, and the CL Type S 260 horsepower for $469. What else? I'm not going to go through all these individually, but I found quite a wealth of information. This was a fun road and track story. So if you remember when the second gen CL came out, they had this specific color limited to only those launch units that was called Sundance Gold. And it was very, very eye-catching. I wouldn't mind having one of those. But at the time, it was pretty striking. And looks like some quotes here that were from the media community. One of my favorite ads here that just has the speed sort of indicator, and it says, "Whoa." I think that was on the back cover of one of my Acura style magazines. This was kind of cool. The early days of Acura's web efforts, they had the website spelled out. Hold on, I'll pull this out. They had the website spelled out across the trunk lid in emblem font. So that was kind of a way to direct people to the build and price utility, which back in 2003 was kind of a novelty. Back in those days, you were still getting a lot of print brochures and things like that. Good little Auto Week magazine. Summary here from Auto Week in February 2002. There's my color. Same one here. That must have been a stock photo that all the different outlets were directed to. Forgot I had all this stuff. Another one referencing the Sundance Gold car that debuted at the LA Auto Show. These are some press or stock photos. They look a lot like my car. In fact, right down to the navigation, that pretty much looks like one of the pictures I took tonight. Wow, a manual transmission for Acura's Hot Rod Coupe. This was very cool find. The Detroit Auto Show back in 03. How many of these models would we love to have today? So obviously the NA2 NSX front and center on the turnstile. Obviously you've got a TLS with the underbody kit there, followed by MDX. Up top you see RSX, MDX. This one right here, it's kind of a crude rendering here, but that was the RDX prototype that later became the RDX as we know it. And then of course the CL here. Really attractive display they had in Detroit that year. Here are a couple of the pictures I referenced when I was out filming the car. This one is me. It's a kind of not a great picture, a little washed out, but that's 6/25 of 2001 when the CL Type S just came out for 2001. This was the era when the Type S brand was coming back, and Acura had me out to the test facility in California for some filming. And as it so happened, I helped them source 3 of these 4 cars. So the Carbon Bronze TLS, the RSX Type S, and the 2nd Gen TLS. And there's the CL that Acura has. I need to get a color matched license plate like they have, but that's the automatic car. But yeah, I think it had definitely fewer than 1,000 miles on it, maybe 500 or 600. Amazing day to spend out there at Honda's private test track. I have these items. This is the 2013 navigation DVD update. I'm not sure if that's the one that's actually running in the car right now or not, but anyway, there it is. Here's the 03 CL specific brochure showcasing the satin silver there in all its glory. A lot of conversation in this brochure discusses that available 6-speed manual because it was such a enthusiast sort of centric offering. This one here just has the full line model lineup. San Marino red is also a great color. There's that one there. And this one was just kind of a little teaser thing. It's a single fold out little pamphlet, maybe predated the full brochure, but you can see some of the specs here that we already talked about this afternoon. It's one of those cars that I like to think that Acura didn't necessarily have to build it, but they catered toward or listened to consumer feedback and put that manual transmission in it. And today, those cars are pretty highly regarded in the enthusiast community. There's a strong CL Type S 6-speed Facebook group, I think, with a couple thousand people in it that I'm part of. And it's a community that's just like many other Acura communities, very helpful to one another and closely knit. And I am thrilled to be part of that community now, finally. So I look forward to interacting with those of you who have CLs. And maybe one of these days we'll have a national Acura CL meet. Who knows?
Let's see here. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. A real fixer-upper for artistic creative types. Formal dining room, a sweeping staircase. Oh, honey, a fireplace. And that's how fabulous. Honey, what do you think?
We'll take it.
The new 6-speed Acura CL Type S.